Ayy, look, yeah, ayy. I'm in the lab like Dexter, brand new batch he tested. I'm with all the extras, don't try and bitch, I'm pressure. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers. I'm the type to step on steppers, I'm the type to step on steppers.
And aside from that, now we'll go ahead and move on to the keys for all of these teams in the NFC East, and we'll go ahead and start off with the Dallas Cowboys. So what do the Cowboys need to do for this upcoming season in order for them to be successful?
Dak Prescott has to elevate the offense. That's the biggest key. The defense is already phenomenal. They picked up Stephon Gilmore. They have the wide receiver. They have the weapons. Tony Pollard is going to be back. They have the offensive line. Dak Prescott has to elevate his game. That's the biggest key, and I think everybody has to focus on him. I mean, leading the NFL in interceptions when you're missing games is just absurd. He's the microscope of everything that this team does come playoff time. When they lose, they're going to be looking at Dak Prescott. This defense is already there. The pieces around him are already there. It's on him to perform. So the biggest key is Dak Prescott. I don't think it's anyone else.
They go as far as Dak takes him. Simple as that. If you look at recent playoff games, the way Cowboys be losing, their defense is there. CD's showing up, the receivers are showing up, and you see the quarterback. He's not up to par. And you pay a guy $40 million a year, he got to perform. So for me, Dak, they go as far as Dak goes. If Dak performs well, Cowboys do great. But if he doesn't, that defense can carry them so far. The run game can carry them so far. But at the end of the day, if Dak has to make that play and he doesn't make that play, then they don't win nothing. So as far as Dak goes, if he can play phenomenal, they have a chance. But that's it for me.
I'm not too concerned with Dak Prescott. I think with his play, I
don't understand why you like you
because I look at it. I understand he had 15 interceptions last year, and those interceptions will probably go down. And majority of those interceptions weren't necessarily his fault. We have highlighted that during the season, and so I think the Dallas Cowboys, their defense is still going to be the same, even though although they added Stephon Gilmore, so now they have a cornerback duo. For Dak Prescott, it's not even about him, producing. I think it's about him needing to stay healthy. I think that's the main issue. Number one, I think if at any point in the season, if this guy gets injured, he gets banged up, and they have to go resort to Cooper Rush, that offense is going to be in complete shambles. Although they were able to, keep their heads above water last year, I don't think
5-1 with Cooper Rush last year.
Yeah, but if you can look at Cooper Rush's numbers, I think he might have had about 900 and something yards and about 5 touchdowns during that span. That's game manager numbers, bro. He's not really doing much to elevate the offense. We all know that Dax is the guy that's going to be airing the ball out. And when he came back from weeks, I think for about there's about an 4-week stretch, 4 or 5 week stretch where I think he had about 900 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. And so I think number one, I think the major key for the Dallas Cowboys would be just to keep Dak Prescott as healthy as possible, try to protect him as much as possible, because as long as he's under center, I think their offense will be just fine. And Tony Pollard not being the running back one is also another key for the Dallas Cowboys. It's also just to kind of give him all those touches. Let's see how he operates when he was a true number one running back last year, but he also was playing alongside Ezekiel Elliott. So kind of wasn't necessarily like a split in touches, but obviously Pollard had more touches, but now he's taking all of those touches. I mean, now we're going to be able to see how many touches he's going to be able to manage as a running back and as a receiver coming out of that backfield. And so those would be my 2 keys. My third one that I put down, Mike McCarthy, trusting him as an offensive coordinator this year. He'll be calling the plays. I think it'll be smooth sailing. I think they mentioned that they're going to be using Dak Prescott's language, so it won't be much different in comparison to recent years. So those are my keys for the Dallas Cowboys. But overall, I'm not too concerned about Dak Prescott's play. Maybe in the postseason.
I think that's great.
I think in the regular season, they'll be just fine.
I think Dak Prescott is the one that you should be focused on, even during the regular season. Postseason, it's a given. Even the regular season, he's the guy that needs to be highlighted. I mean, the defense, for them to even still be 5-1 when Cooper Rush is there, just speaks volumes about how good they were. So really on Dak Prescott and elevating his game, because there was situations that they could have won games if Dak Prescott wasn't throwing turnovers. Partially some of them weren't his fault, but even then, it's still on him to elevate this offense. And there is no excuse for him to have 15 interceptions. That's just absurd. So he's the guy that everybody's gonna be looking at. Mike McCarthy, he's gonna be calling the plays now, but he's not gonna be the focus. It's not gonna be anybody on the defense 100%. Tony Pollard, yes, he's gonna be coming into a role where he's the workhorse running back, but Dak Prescott's the one that's under the microscope. He's the one that everybody's gonna be looking at. So I just don't see anyone else being the key except him.
Fair enough. We'll go ahead and move on to the Philadelphia Eagles. What do they need to do in order for them to be successful for this upcoming season?
To be honest, I just think the Eagles just have to try to keep up that level of play that they had last season. Yes, they did lose C.J. Gardner Johnson. They lost one of their offensive linemen. Even then, I still feel like they did get key additions with Nolan Smith and Jalen Carter in the draft, and they picked up Trey Edmonds. And then of course they have DeAndre Swift and Rashad Penny. So they got pieces on this team. They're nothing short of a complete roster. When we talk from the defense to the offense to quarterback, it's just Jalen Hurts continuing that level of play that they had. I don't think there's much keys other than just attempting to replicate what they did last season. I had the formula is there for them. I have full, complete trust in Nick Sirianni as a head coach. I think he did a fantastic job with this team last year, and I expect nothing less this year. Just do exactly what they did last year. That's the key for them. Just consistency coming into this season.
I agree with you. I feel like it's just at this point, it's consistency. They have a phenomenal offense and a phenomenal defense. Although they did lose one of the best safeties in the league in C.J. Gardner Johnson, but hey, I think they can just fit somebody in right there with the other pieces they got on the defensive side of the ball, especially them getting Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Trayvon Edmonds, and offensively, it's the same thing they're going to do last year. They're going to pound the ball, run the ball. And you got 2-3 great options on the receiving end with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and then you add Swift too to the passing game. And they got a lot of options on the offensive side of the ball. So for me, I'm pretty high on the Eagles this year. I feel like last year we talked about we got to see what Jalen Hurts can do, see if he gets tested, and we got to see if he's this type of quarterback. He played up to par. I feel like this year he got the MVP in his hands if he can stay healthy. Last year it was right there for him. I feel like this year if he's healthy throughout the whole season, he can win MVP. So for me, it's not much that changes from last year. And just if they got to keep that same type of hunger basically. If they want to get back to the Super Bowl, they barely lost. They got to keep that same type of hunger. So just them having that consistency, having that same type of hunger that they had last year, they go back right to the top. So
for me, my key for the Philadelphia Eagles was for them to collect as many wins as possible in the first half of the season, from weeks 1 through 8, pretty much weeks 1 through 9, leading up into their week 10 bye. The only 3 tough matchups I see are on the road in week 6 versus the Jets, at home versus the Miami Dolphins, and then week 9 at home versus the Dallas Cowboys. And so I think if these guys are able to take care of business in the first half of the season and get the wins that they're supposed to, like week 1 at New England, week 2 at home versus Minnesota, week 3 Tampa, week 4 Washington, 5 LA Rams, week 8 Washington, I think they can kind of come out of that bye week with a lot more confidence if they take a couple of wins off these big teams. Like let's say they split, they win against the Jets and the Cowboys and lose to the Dolphins, or but a different type of order, different situation. I think that'll be key for the Philadelphia Eagles, because once they come out of that week 10 bye, it's all hell breaks loose for them. They got week 11, week 12, week 13 Chiefs, Bills, Niners, and then week 14 to the Dallas Cowboys. And so I think their strength of schedule in that second half of the season concerns me a lot, because I'm not too sure if they're going to be able to, if they're going to put their foot on the gas and kind of do what they did last year and kind of just reel off a whole bunch of wins. But their strength of schedule concerns me. I'm not too sure if it concerns you guys.
I mean, like, it would concern me if they're one of those teams that could go 9-8 or something. But like when you're the top dog in the NFC, when you're the Philadelphia Eagles, like any other team should be scared of facing them instead of the other way around. I think with the roster that they have, they can go toe to toe with about any of these teams that you mentioned. And there could be a situation where they have a winning record basically against almost all these teams, barring the Chiefs. It's a possibility that they're able to beat the Jets, Dolphins, and Bills, and maybe just lose to the Chiefs just because of how good of a roster that they have and how complete it is. So, I mean, yes, there is some they're going to be facing some tough dogs, but they're the tough dog as well in this. So
they're one of the best teams in the league, so I wouldn't worry about them facing other top teams. I feel like they can go toe to toe with any team in the NFL. So the strength of schedule to a top team like them, it don't matter to me.
I think you guys are really, really underestimating their strength of schedule, man. I think none of these top dogs they're facing are any slouches, bro. And I think I'm not sitting here saying the Eagles are a slouch either. They're not one of the top teams, but this is football, man. It's going to be tough. You got to go from Kansas City to Buffalo to San Francisco and spin it back against Dallas. That's a crazy 4-week stretch. I'd understand if it was spread out over a course of 17 weeks, but it's not. It's literally 4 weeks in a row coming off their bye week, which they'll be the most refreshed. They got to play those 4 teams, and in 3 out of the 4 weeks before that, they got to go Jets, Dolphins, Washington Commanders, and then they got to play the Dallas Cowboys. So I think as long as the Philadelphia Eagles take care of business in the first half of the season, I think the second half of the season will be smooth sailing. They might be able to drop a few games and still be all right in order to hold on to home field advantage in the NFC. But man, it's going to be interesting to see how everything else pans out for them. But aside from the Philadelphia Eagles, it's time to move on to the New York Giants. And what do they need to do in order for them to be successful for this upcoming season?
Resolve this Saquon Barkley situation 100%. We're going to get to it later, but just looking at this team, I don't see a situation where if Saquon Barkley is not able to be on the field for this Giants roster, I don't see a situation where they're able to be productive offensively. I think Daniel Jones is productive as a runner, but when you don't have a running back to hand the ball off to, and there's not a ton of big name wide receivers. I do believe Isaiah Hodgins is pretty good wideout, but it's not like a star level wideout. I think it's going to be an issue where, like offensively, what is it going to look like in the first half of last season? Saquon Barkley was huge for this team. Second half he kind of slowed down, but is Daniel Jones going to be able to get away as being essentially a game manager that's able to pick up yardage with his feet and protect the ball? I just don't see that being a situation that can be replicated coming into this season. If Saquon isn't out there on the field for this New York Giants, I don't see it. So resolving his Saquon Barkley situation is 100%. Like to me, the biggest key. And then a side point to that, since we're going to be talking about Saquon Barkley situation in a bit, I would say another key for them is Daniel Jones as a passer. I do feel like last year Daniel Jones did what he needed to do with that roster that's out there, but coming into the season, is that something that's going to be replicated? Is that possible to just walk around with only 20 something touchdowns that he passed, or maybe even less than that? You're muted.
15?
Yeah, even less than that. You see, I don't know if that's a possibility to walk around like getting wins, especially with the schedule that they have, picking up wins and not being as much of a high volume passer and a touchdown without necessarily star wide receivers. So, it's Daniel Jones as a passer. Can he progress? Can he be productive as a passer? Can he be a high volume passer? It would need to be. If Saquon isn't out there, can he essentially carry the offense? So that's my other key.
Yeah, obviously Saquon's situation for them is the number one thing that they got to fix. But just to tap into I feel like the coaching staff especially the offensive coaching staff, they got to open up the passing game for Daniel Jones. Going into the offseason, they traded for Darren Waller. I mean, phenomenal tight end once he's on the field if he can stay healthy. But last year, 15 touchdowns, ran phenomenal. I think he had 8 running touchdowns last year? 7?
Yeah, 760 yards, something like that.
800 yards running? Phenomenal, but that's a lot due to, having Saquon in the backfield. Saquon opens up the game so much for them. So, for him to start the season off without Saquon there, what's going to happen? If the run game is not going, you're going to be forced to throw the ball. So I do want to see them, open up the game a little bit for him. And I do want to see if Waller can stay healthy because I feel like, that's a big target for him. And Daniel Jones can find a solution with that. But, the receiving options, Sterling Shepard can never stay healthy. I don't want to speak about Kenny Galladay. I don't know if they cut him this offseason. Isaiah Hodgins.
I don't think he's on the team anymore.
Yeah, Isaiah Hodgins, he looked good last year in the playoffs and late towards the season, so that's another option for them. But they gotta open up the passing game for Daniel Jones. As a quarterback getting paid $44 million a year, you can't come into the season and just say, hey, I'm gonna throw another 15 passing touchdowns. That's enough. You're gonna need to throw at least 30. Catapult your team to a position where they can win, especially without a phenomenal running back like Saquon playing. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think obviously the most obvious one, the glaring one, is paying Saquon Barkley. But for me, I think in order for the New York Giants to be a successful team this upcoming season, I think they need to do a better job defensively at generating turnovers. Last year, they only had 19 takeaways, 6 interceptions, and 13 fumbles. And so their turnover ratio was only +3. Now, obviously it's not the greatest, but they weren't in the negatives. But it definitely could be a lot better. And if Saquon Barkley is not going to suit up for this team week 1, and pretty much for the first half of the season up until he needs to, their defense is going to have to step up because, as you guys have highlighted already, Daniel Jones isn't the passer that these guys, expect him to be. Like this, he can't really pass the ball like that. We haven't seen it yet, and even when he's tried, hasn't been good. And so, this team only goes as far as Saquon takes them, and without Saquon for those first however many games he misses and however many games he sits, it's going to have to be a real defensive battle for the New York Giants, and those guys have to generate a lot of turnovers on that side of the ball. I think they also need to have a little bit more offensive line success. I think their offensive line was just decent last year, but I think they could have done a better job at protecting Daniel Jones, also opening up a lot more holes in the running game.
It was like
Because now that
it was like a bottom 5 offensive line. It was pretty
bottom
bad.
5 offensive line,
Outside
so
of,
it's like
what's his name? Andrew Thomas. Outside of him, it was pretty bad.
Evan Neal needs to be better. I think that's one of their guys that they drafted. So they got to do a better job at, protecting their quarterback and also creating a lot more rushing goals for,
I
whoever
think
is going to
Evan
be
Neal,
it.
the issue they said it's because they moved him from right tackle. They moved him to right tackle, even though naturally he played left in his last season. So they're moving him back to right tackle. So hopefully maybe that helps ease. But it's pretty bad. I mean, the offensive line. I mean, it's always been. I don't know what it is about this Giants team. I feel like the last 4 or 5 years we've said the same thing about their offensive line. It's been an issue for a while, and I mean, hopefully it's better this year. But I don't have much hope about that.
It's tough to build an offensive line, man. Teams can draft offensive linemen for 4 or 5 years in a row, and maybe only one out of the 5 will pan out to be an elite talent. So, but for me, that's probably my number one for the New York Giants. They got to be able to generate a lot more turnovers in order for them to kind of keep them afloat in games and give Daniel Jones a chance offensively. But last team in the NFC East, we'll go ahead and move on to the Washington Commanders. What do they need to do in order for them to be successful for the upcoming season?
Can Sam Howell step up to the plate? That's the biggest question mark for me coming into this season, because when you've looked at the Commanders, they've been a bevy of quarterbacks that they've had, and it just has not worked out. They've had Tyler Heineke, they got Carson Wentz, and they've had a bunch of quarterbacks since Kirk Cousins, and it just seems like any single quarterback that they put, Alex Smith, it hasn't panned out for them. And a guy like Terry McLaurin, he deserves a quarterback that's able to get him the ball. They have Jahan Dotson, they have Brian Robinson, they have pieces on that offensive end. They're a fairly young team that I feel like can be utilized if they have a quarterback that can get them the ball. And Sam Howell, he is an unknown, but there is some talent there, and there's potential for him to be good as a quarterback. And I feel like that's the biggest question mark, because they have the defensive pieces, they can be productive on that end, but offensively they're just not able to find that consistency, and that's exactly what they need from a quarterback, to step in and get the guys their ball. I mean, defensively, that they're going to be solid with the pieces that they have, but offensively, can Sam Howell come in and just generate offense for this team? That's exactly what they're looking for. So I think he's the biggest key for me. Can Sam Howell step up to the plate?
Their issue always been quarterback these last couple of years. So for them, another different quarterback coming into the system, if he can come in and perform, if Sam Howell does step up to the plate, they do have a nice roster around him defensively and offensively. And I feel like, that's the only problem. And I feel like Brian Robinson might have a breakout year this year. Can he have a second-year breakout with Eric Bieniemy as one of the best running back coaches, taught up Jamal Charles, LaShawn McCoy, all these type of Kareem Hunt, Pacheco, all the Chiefs running back. He's been, mentoring them. So for them, quarterback situation, if their run game can step up, and them having Chase Young back on the defensive side of the ball, I feel like that's going to bring a lot more pressure. And they do have a phenomenal D line, so just adding him back, it's going to make it even more scary.
Yeah, to piggyback off what you guys said, I'm not going to go ahead and use that as my takeaway or my key for them. But for the last 5 seasons for the Washington Commanders offense, 18 points per game, 30th in the NFL, 310 total passing yards, total yards, 31st in the NFL, 198 passing yards per game, 31st in the NFL, 96 touchdowns, 29th in the NFL, and 235 sacks allowed, 30th in the NFL. So 100%, these guys do need to, be hitting on all cylinders from week one with Eric Bieniemy as their offensive coordinator, Sam Howell under center, to be better than what they were these last 5 years. But for me, my key would be to keep Chase Young as healthy as possible, to keep him healthy for this team. I think, him going into his 4th year with no 5th-year option, the Washington Commanders are pretty much banking on him just having a pretty solid year to the point where they can just kind of re-sign him on this very team-friendly deal. But they also do run the risk of this guy just kind of blowing up and having a breakout season and getting a huge payday in free agency next year. And so I think if they're able to keep Chasing on the field, and Chase Young, who hasn't really played much in these past couple of years, I think it's going to help their defense a lot. Although their offense, has all the skilled players in the world, where you have Scary Terry, you have Jahan Dotson. I think Logan Thomas is still their tight end. Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson in the backfield. They got some pieces. I'm not going to go ahead and say they're one of the best skilled groups in the NFL. probably bottom 15. But they got some pieces to work with. They got an OC that they brought in, so they can make some work. But I think defensively, Chase Young needs to be leading the way for this team, and in order for them to do that, he has to be out there on the field for them. So that would be my number one key for the Washington Commanders in order for them to be successful, because we know these guys are always going to be one of those few teams that kind of just keep their head above waters and kind of stick around up until the very last week of the season, trying to fight their way into the playoffs with about 7, 8, 9 wins at most. And so if they're able to do that, who knows? They might have a shot with how wide open the NFC is. So.
Record a new hit, then we making us a film. Wouldn't sign a deal if I got a couple mil. Been in the lab, now they throwing out deals. Yes, me and now late, now that's overkill.